What's up, everybody? Welcome in. Happy Friday. Welcome to another draft edition of the Barking Brown Show. I'm your host, Jacob. I am solo today for Cleveland Browns Mock Draft 4.0. I haven't done a draft in several weeks. We did, if you missed last week's show, it was Senior Bowl recap with Jeff Risdon of Browns Wire and Lions Wire. Go check that out. I think it was a fantastic episode. A lot of great insight from Jeff, and it was a really fun conversation that I really enjoyed. I am presented this week, as we always are, by our friends over at Homage Apparel. I've got the Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb NFL Jam shirt. Man, I love putting these shirts on and recording these shows and then sleeping in them. They're incredibly soft. Got everything you need. NFL, Ohio State, Guardians, Cavs. They got some awesome, really great stuff over there at Homage. They're the best in the business. So check them out. There's a link in the description down below if you're on YouTube. The link is also in the audio version if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or anything like that. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please consider giving us a 5-star review. It really, really helps us out greatly. If you're on YouTube and you're new to this channel, welcome. Appreciate having you guys here. Hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and we really appreciate all that. All right, guys. So for today, for this week's draft video, I decided I want to do another mock draft. I've done 3 mock drafts here in video format on YouTube and whatnot, and I got really thinking about how I wanted to do this next one, and I kind of settled with a live mock draft. So I'm going to walk you through the way I do my mock drafts, the simulator that I like and prefer to use, and just kind of my thoughts on some of these prospects as we make these decisions together. And you can tell me what you like, what you hated, and, anything in between, right? All right, guys. So I'm going to bring my screen up here for you. I typically use NFL Mock Draft Database. They tend to take all of the big boards and simulators and everything, and they create their big board with consensus. So it's kind of like a combination of like the Draft Network and PFF and all those things. And these numbers come together where, they've got Will Levis up here at 4-5. Maybe you don't think that, but maybe there's a bunch of mock drafts that put them. So they compile all these mock drafts and datas and ranking and all that stuff. And they make what I think is one of the better simulators to use. And the big boards, you can see when you use it here, we've got all the Browns picks here. We'll have all the picks going on up here. We can have some trades, all kinds of stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's see how this. It's like, who's going to fall? Who's going to make it there? What are the conversations we're going to get to have when we get here? And let's see. We are on the clock at 42 names to choose from. So when I do these mock drafts, I start by just looking at all the top guys. So Drew Sanders, I in no way think they're taking a linebacker here. I think Drew Sanders is a fantastic football player. I love Antonio Johnson. I just think it's too early based on who else I see on the board here. I love Maze Smith. I'm not big on Gervin Dexter. But the thing is, Josh Downs is an absolute home run of a hit if Downs is here. I think he's got that speed size combination where not necessarily the combination of the speed size as much as a big catch radius and, the blow you away speed. One thing I like to do sometimes is I look at these guys and say, okay, what can you do when you're at your best? Like, what is your best attributes? What are your best attributes here? Josh Downs finishes, I'm pulling up the stats for you guys, finishes in North Carolina, 94 catches, 1,029 yards, 11 touchdowns. 4.4s, just for anybody that want to know about the speed. Anytime a guy does that, it's just... Anyway, he's highly explosive, an incredibly explosive player, highly productive in college, and he just produces yards after catch. He's this exact bona fide guy that you need in Cleveland. He's the missing piece in my mind is a guy like Josh Downs. I love Zay Flowers a lot. I think he's a little faster. I think Downs is a much more complete player, and he's got the college production and the traits. Sometimes you draft a guy based on production. Sometimes you draft him based on raw traits. Downs has both. If for some reason you're at 42 and this Carolina wide receiver is here on the board, I think it's absolutely a home run hit, and I'm taking Josh Downs here right away. That's not even a question. I showed you some of the other names on there. I'm just thinking, I think they're signing a defensive tackle. I think they'll sign an edge, some good players to where they're not pigeonholed. They don't have to get a D tackle in their first up. I'm not going to do trades tonight, so we'll reject that. They don't have to get a defensive tackle. They don't have to get an edge. They don't have to get these guys in any particular order, so they can sit back and truly look at the board and say, this is what I need to do to make this football team better. All right, so we'll start here. Like I said, I like to look at the first guys up here. Some guys that jump off Chris Smith and JL Skinner to me are fantastic safety products. I love JL Skinner a lot. He's just not quite a refined finished product. Chris Smith's a more finished product. My controversial draft take, I think, is I do not have any interest in Jack Campbell. I think he's just a pad. His numbers are inflated, and I'm not into that. We're not looking wide receivers anymore. I like to do the positions of need. So let's see what's going on. Defensive tackle. I really like Carl Brooks. I love Byron Young. I don't know how Carl Brooks is now leapfrog Byron Young. That's just Corey Kinnan, my editor over at Browns Wire, and I have these conversations about Byron Young, and he loves Byron Young, and I have no idea why this is kind of playing out this way. But I love Byron Young here, but I'm not sure. I think he's good enough to go there, but it looks like here's a guy, Adebawore. I love Adebawore a lot, and that ultimately I think is going to be the pick as I kind of zoom around here. Adebawore, he plays with just absolutely tremendous leverage. He understands hand placement, how to use his strength and his strong base to really take advantage of what's going on here. So he has tremendous strength. I think he's kind of a bit of a stiff athlete, so to speak. But he just showed that he's a bit of a technician. Like I said, plays with the tremendous leverage and strength. Trying to bring it up here. He has great size, the bull rush. He's an average athlete. The motor, there it is. He just fights. He never stops. Never stops. And I still think he's kind of a raw player. I think you've got a player that could really be molded by a guy like Jim Schwartz. I think that Jim Schwartz could do for this defensive line what Bell Callahan has done for the offensive line. So I think Adebawore would just be a home run here around 98. Might be a little early for some people. I did pick him in the 4th round of a mock last week. But really, I got Josh Downs. I got Adebawore here, and I just feel like you're going with 2 guys here to start this draft out in the 2nd and 3rd round with guys that I think are contributors on day 1. Not necessarily starters. Josh Downs probably could be a starter. It just depends on how that room shakes out, but he doesn't have to be. He can be that third guy that plays in the slot, some outside snaps and things like that. I think Downs can do it all. I know we're now back talking about Downs. So again, like I do, I look at the top. A lot of these guys, corner, quarterback, running back, wide receiver. So the top guys in terms of who's on the board, best available, so to speak, quote unquote. I'm not really going for any of those guys. Let's see what's going on at defensive line. We've still got Byron Young here. And Carl Brooks is my diamond in the rough kind of draft crush. I still think I can't take him here. I don't even think I can take him to 1-4-8-2. Just he's coming from the MAC and a hyper productive player, a relentless kind of rusher. It's just you're coming from the Mid-American Conference, and I'm not even going to get to see him in the combine, which is really troublesome. I have no idea why he's not going there. Byron Young might have some of the best. He might have the best hands in this draft class, especially at the defensive tackle spot. I like Byron Young a lot. Trying to see if I can find my notes on him because I had a couple of notes here about him, and I don't seem to see where I wrote it all down because I love Byron Young. He can play the run. He could be a rusher. He's got all those physical tools and the characteristics to be a 3-down player. Again, another player that can play a role for you immediately raises the basement of this room, and he's got a very high ceiling. I think that he can become this product to be a true 3-down defensive linemen, and there's not a lot of those in this class. There's some rushers like Colby Wooden, I think, is a rusher, but can't really play against the run. I think Byron Young can. I don't understand why he continues to be this far. I mean, maybe just some refinement, some technique things, but he's got the size, the strength, and the athleticism to be an every down player. And I think it's a no-brainer if he's there at 111 that you take him. And now you're looking at having your 3 biggest needs actually ended up lining up pretty well: wide receiver, edge, and defensive line. Now I can start having some fun here. So we've got defensive line. I like Deion Henley a lot at linebacker. I'm not sure if it's a little early for that. We kind of go down here. Here's two interesting ones right here. Nick Herbig plays kind of that outside linebacker stand-up rusher that you really see Jim Schwartz kind of been successful with that sort of thing. And so if I hadn't taken Adebawore and I had gone maybe with a safety or something like that, which they could do early on in this draft, they could go offensive lineman. I think he would be a great pick in here in this 126 range. You see he's the 120th on this particular board. But I'm looking at Tippmann, the interior offensive line from Wisconsin. I remember the last offensive lineman that we took from Wisconsin. It kind of worked out. And as I'm recording this on Thursday night, he may or may not be a Hall of Famer. He wasn't as of the second I'm doing this right now. Big, strong, athletic, similar system. They need depth in the interior. Wyatt Teller was not full strength last year and struggled at times. We have no idea what's going on at center. It's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, you're starting to draft some guys here. You're trying to figure out, like, where am I going to draft this? How do I fill this particular hole? Like, and I think with Joe Tippmann, he played center at a very well-known school for running the football and that sort of thing. And it's just a similar scheme, has good strength, moves well in open fields, and he could be, competition for Nick Harris if Posick moves on, and I kind of think he is. But I think that you're looking here at 126 and you're like, I'm going to get a guy here that could compete for the starting job at center, but provide real quality depth behind Nick Harris. I think ultimately will probably be the starting center going into camp. So I'm going to take Joe Tippmann here, and I think that's a pretty easy choice. I'm really intrigued by the fact that Parker Washington is hanging out here in the 5th round at 142. I know I already took Josh Downs, but I think Parker Washington's a fantastic slot receiver. Doesn't really have that blow you away straight line vertical speed, but he's just a playmaker in the open field, and he could be a lot of fun. I'm actually going to sit here and look and say, listen, Herbig is a really fun pass rusher. He's got really nice explosion and burst. He understands how to use his hands. He can play the run relatively well. He can drop into coverage because he is an outside linebacker, but he's also an edge rusher. And if you're talking about a guy that can, let me pull up his numbers for you real quick because I didn't pull them up here because we're doing this on the fly. So you're seeing how some of these things I do as I'm trying to read, as I try to do this, my process, so to speak, for you guys. So Herbig's numbers, I wanted to see the number. So 6'2", 227 is what you're looking at in terms of his size. You're looking at 11 sacks this year, 15 and a half tackles for loss. Last year was 9 sacks and 14 and a half tackles for loss. So in the last 2 years, 20 sacks and 30 tackles for loss. And you're saying I can get something like that has some really redeemable, some really nice, impressive traits, can play outside linebacker, your will linebacker coverage, rush the passer, would be a really good schematic fit in the 5th round. Yeah, sign me up. I love this pick because we come right back on the board at 144. I always find this really interesting. This is where I think you could start to look running back here. We haven't actually, here's a guy I love a lot. Interestingly enough, we don't have a safety on this roster because I kind of went Herbig because I just think he was the best player available there and presents a really interesting skill set for the Browns. Jair Brown is a guy, I actually just finished my film study on him a couple of days ago, and I got my notes here for you guys. Jared Brown's really interesting deep safety. They played him similar to what Greg Williams at times did with Jabril Peppers, and I laughed because when I was watching him, I was like, I wrote down, they play him like Jabril Peppers a lot. He's a really long physical safety, has good size. He crashes downhill in a hurry, has a really good athleticism and acceleration to get down in the run game and make those plays happen. He plays deep single high. He's a good tackler in open field. He kind of processes slow. So he can struggle with some of the zone coverages and responsibilities, especially when he plays closer to the line of scrimmage. Why a guy like this would be available here at 144. But I think he has really nice ball skills, and he, understands and reads the quarterback's eyes relatively well. It's just it's a slow processor. I think he just needs more experience, more time out there and working with coaches to kind of understand what's happening in front of him. But he does have the speed and athleticism and raw tools to be a really nice deep coverage safety. And I think he could be like Richard LeCounte didn't work out, but I could see that being what that is. You bring this guy in to be this deep single high safety, especially when you're manning up across the board, because I think the Browns will play a ton of man coverage this year. And I think he's pretty good, especially in man. I think he's a good man safety, but if he's your single high and he's just trying to prevent the deep vertical play, he's got the skills to do that, and he can make a impact in the running game. So I'll take Jair Brown out of Penn State. Look at that. We're just look at all those letters that start the alphabet. Now we got to wait to get, here we go. We're back on the board. I always put it on fast because I'm just too incredibly impatient. Okay, so some needs, some things we can look at. Running backs. I like to look at running backs here. I like corners still in this spot. And then Tyler Scott. I'm not even going to do this. I would take Tyler Scott here because he could potentially be a day two. I think he's a day 2 pick. I think he's a day 2 wide receiver. I think he goes to the 2nd or 3rd round. So sometimes these things are a little interesting. We got an offensive line. We could go look at some tackles here. I like Jackson Kirkland. He's kind of falling right now, which is an interesting thing. So I'm not really sure if we want to go there. Tight end is fun. Payne Durham is a really nice guy, and I think I'm actually going to go here with Payne Durham. They're going to give me a bad grade, but Payne Durham, he had a really nice Senior Bowl. He was a part of some really bad offenses in Purdue, so I don't really. He's one of those guys where I saw him in a system that was trying to highlight him in the Senior Bowl, because you're trying to highlight everybody at the Senior Bowl. You're trying to put them in positions to improve their draft stock. I thought Payne Durham had a really good. He's had a really good week. I'm going to bring up his size for you real quick because he's a bigger guy. Was asked to do a lot of blocking and sort of things, as you would expect at Purdue, where they're not a very prolific passing school, so to speak. Has 6'5", 255. He's a big man. He's got some really big hands, reliable hands, catches the football, and he's a good blocker. And I just think what you need as a number 2 tight end, I think Payne Durham could potentially slide in there, and they're going to give me a C. They're going to dock the heck out of me, but I do think if Payne Durham's there at 190, I think that's kind of a good spot. I like that the best guy on the board right now is a punter at 248. Oh no, we were all the way down there. What was going on there, guys? I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so this is where you start getting interesting because I like to take corners, defensive backs or running backs kind of in this last spot. We're looking at some corners. Max Melton's a pretty good corner. I like Mekhi Blackman is pretty good. He's all right. Good is in terms of like it's the 7th round. I kind of love doing this, and I know they have Kellen Mond on the roster, but I'm just going to take Max Duggan because that dude is a gamer. He's a really fun, nice professional, and I think that he could provide some excitement and some spark off of the bench if you needed it. So anyway, to wrap this thing up, Josh Downs, the wide receiver from North Carolina at 42, I think would be an absolute dream, perfect home run of a hit. I take Adebawore, the edge rusher from Northwestern at 98. Byron Young, who I think is highly underrated at 111, the defensive tackle from Alabama. Joe Tippmann, the center from Wisconsin, to compete with Nick Harris. Nick Herbig from Wisconsin, I go back-to-back Badgers. An outside linebacker who is a pass rush specialist and could be a really nice scheme fit. Jair Brown, I think, is a good a deep safety candidate that can turn into a decent player in the NFL. Payne Durham could be a really fun tight end. I take Max Duggan, the quarterback from TCU. I appreciate you guys stopping in, checking out what we got going on here in Mock Draft 4.0. So I appreciate you guys. Most valuable thing you can give somebody is some of your time. So I appreciate you giving some of yours to me today. And I will talk to you guys soon. As always, go Browns.